I was folding laundry in the quiet of our suburban home when the phone rang. It was an ordinary Thursday, but that phone call was about to shatter the mundanity of my life. I wiped my hands on my apron as I answered. "Hey, Mom, it's Lucas," came the voice of my son, who had ventured out into the world, leaving the nest for college 2 years ago. "Lucas, darling, is everything okay?" I asked, a smile naturally forming on my lips at the sound of his voice. There was a pause, a hesitation I wasn't used to with Lucas. "Mom, I need to ask you something. Where's Dad these days?" I frowned slightly, puzzled. "Your father?" "He's been really busy with work. He's staying at the company's apartment for a while." "Why do you ask?" Another pause, longer this time. Lucas's voice, when it came, was laden with uncertainty. "Mom, I think Dad's company doesn't have any company apartments." My heart skipped a beat. "How do you know that?" "Well, I was at this job fair, and I overheard some people talking about Dad's company. They said there aren't any company apartments. Mom, is it possible that Dad is lying to us?" The room suddenly felt colder, the walls closing in. I struggled to maintain my composure. "Lucas, are you sure? Maybe you misunderstood." "No, Mom, I'm sure, and I think Dad is seeing someone else." The words hit me like a physical blow. "Lucas, that's a serious accusation. Are you sure you're not mistaken?" "I wish I were, Mom. I saw Dad with this woman younger, maybe in her 20s. They seemed close. Too close." My hands trembled, the phone almost slipping from my grasp. The man I had spent 20 years of my life with, could he really betray us like this? "Mom, are you there?" Lucas's voice was laced with concern. I took a deep breath, trying to steady my voice. "Yes, I'm here. Lucas, thank you for telling me. I need some time to think about this. We'll figure this out, Mom. I'm here for you," he said firmly. After I hung up, I sat at the kitchen table, the unfinished laundry forgotten. My mind raced with questions and fears. Had I been so blind? Was the love and trust I invested in my marriage a mere facade? The thought of Mark with another woman, especially someone Lucas's age, churned my stomach. I had to find out the truth. But how? The idea of confronting Mark terrified me. Yet the thought of living in ignorance was even worse. I needed answers, and I was determined to get them, no matter how painful they might be. As the sun set outside, casting long shadows across the room, I realized that my once peaceful life was now on the brink of a storm, and I had to brace myself for whatever was coming. Saturday morning dawned with a heaviness that seemed to mirror my mood. Mark was due to visit this weekend, but the thought no longer brought me joy. The words of my son, Lucas, echoed in my mind, tainting every memory I had of Mark. As I prepared breakfast, the doorbell rang. It was my in-laws, George and Helen, arriving for their weekly visit. Despite the turmoil within, I greeted them with a forced smile. "Emma, dear, you look a bit off. Is everything all right?" Helen asked, her sharp eyes missing nothing. "Just a headache," I lied, unwilling to burden them with my suspicions. We sat around the breakfast table, chatting about mundane things. But my heart wasn't in it. My gaze kept drifting to Mark's empty chair, a stark reminder of the growing distance between us. When the topic turned to Mark, Helen's tone was warm. "He's been working so hard lately. You must be proud of him, getting that big project at the office." I nodded, my throat tight. "Yes, very proud." George, always the jovial one, chimed in. "Remember how he used to say he'd be a big shot one day? Looks like he was right." Their pride in their son was palpable, and it twisted the knife in my heart further. How could I shatter this image they had of Mark? The loving son, the dedicated husband. But beneath that facade lay a different truth, one that Lucas had unwittingly uncovered. As they continued to praise Mark, a part of me wanted to scream, to tell them that their perfect son was a liar, a cheat. But I couldn't, not without proof. The rest of their visit passed in a blur. I was there, but not really. My mind was elsewhere, caught in a storm of betrayal and hurt. After they left, I found myself wandering through the house, lost in thought. Our home, once a haven of love and security, now felt like a house of cards, ready to collapse at any moment. I stumbled upon a photo album, pages filled with pictures of happier times. Mark and I laughing, holding each other. Was it all just a lie? Had I been living a dream while he lived a double life? That evening, as I lay in bed, sleep eluded me. I realized that I couldn't let this go. I needed to confront Mark, to hear the truth from his lips. Whatever that truth might be, I was ready to face it. I had to be. for my own sanity. And deep down, a part of me yearned for revenge. If Mark had shattered our vows, then he didn't deserve my silence. He didn't deserve the facade of a happy family that I had helped build. As the night deepened, so did my resolve. I would confront Mark, and if my fears were confirmed, he would pay for his betrayal. In what way, I wasn't sure yet, but he would pay. Monday arrived with a sense of foreboding. I had spent the weekend in turmoil, oscillating between denial and a desire for the truth. Today I decided I would confront Mark. As the clock ticked closer to the time Mark was due to arrive, my anxiety grew. My hands trembled as I prepared coffee, each spoonful of sugar sounding unnervingly loud in the silent kitchen. The doorbell rang, jolting me from my thoughts. Taking a deep breath, I opened the door. Mark stood there, his smile faltering slightly as he noticed my somber expression. "Emma, what's wrong?" he asked, stepping inside. I led him to the living room, my heart pounding. "We need to talk, Mark." He looked concerned now, his eyes searching mine. "Of course, anything." I took a deep breath, the words I had rehearsed all weekend spilling out. "Lucas called. He said something disturbing about you being unfaithful." Mark's reaction was immediate, his face flushed, his eyes darting away. "Lucas said what? That's ridiculous, Emma." But his denial lacked conviction, his voice betraying him. I pressed on, the hurt and anger giving me strength. "He saw you, Mark, with a younger woman. He's convinced you're having an affair." Mark's posture stiffened, his expression hardening. "Lucas is mistaken. I can't believe you'd think I'd do something like that." But the more he denied, the clearer the truth became. His body language, the evasion in his eyes, it all pointed to one painful reality. Mark was lying. "Are you really going to stand there and lie to me, Mark?" My voice trembled with emotion. "After all these years, you owe me the truth." For a moment he looked like he might confess. But then his face closed off, his voice cold. "I have nothing to confess, Emma. If you choose to believe Lucas over me, then that's your problem." His words felt like a slap in the face. The man I had loved, trusted, and supported was now a stranger, hiding behind a veil of lies and deceit. The conversation spiraled into an argument, accusations and denials flying. But no confession came. Mark maintained his innocence, even as his lies crumbled around him. Finally, exhausted and emotionally drained, I ended the confrontation. "I can't do this anymore, Mark. I don't know who you are." Mark left, his departure leaving a cold void in the house. I sat there alone, the weight of his betrayal crushing me. But amidst the pain, a fire was kindling within me. A fire fueled by betrayal and the desire for revenge. Mark had chosen to deceive and hurt me. Now, it was my turn to make him pay for his lies. I didn't know how yet, but I was determined. Mark would not get away with this. He would feel the consequences of his actions, just as I was feeling the pain of his betrayal. The days following my confrontation with Mark were a blur of emotions. Betrayal, anger, and disbelief swirled within me, a constant storm. But amidst the chaos, a new resolve was forming. I wouldn't be a victim. I would fight back. One morning, as I sat at the kitchen table going through our finances, the reality of my situation became starkly clear. Mark had always controlled the money, and now I was left with barely enough to cover the bills. The thought of asking him for more was intolerable. Determined, I decided to take control of my life. I started looking for a job, something I hadn't done since before Lucas was born. I scoured the classifieds, sent out resumes, and finally I got a call for an interview at a local retail store. The interview day arrived, and as I sat across from the store manager, Mr. Thompson, I felt a mix of nerves and determination. His questions were straightforward, and I answered them as best as I could, emphasizing my eagerness to learn and adapt. "You've been out of the workforce for a while," Mr. Thompson noted, his tone neutral. "Yes," I admitted, "but I'm ready to start again. I'm hardworking and quick to learn." Mr. Thompson nodded, his expression softening. "All right, Mrs. Thompson, we're willing to give you a chance." Gratitude flooded through me. This was more than a job. It was a step towards my independence. As I started working, I found a sense of empowerment that I hadn't felt in years. Each day at the store was challenging, but it was also liberating. I was making my own money, no longer solely dependent on Mark. However, my newfound independence seemed to irk Mark. He started calling me, his tone oscillating between condescension and anger. "Why do you need to work?" he sneered during one call. "I provide for you, don't I? Or are you trying to make a point?" His words stung, but they also fueled my resolve. I'm working because I want to be independent, Mark. I'm not your puppet anymore. There was a pause, and then he laughed, a cold, mocking sound. Well, if you're so independent, maybe I should stop supporting you altogether. See how you like that? The threat was clear, but I refused to be intimidated. Do what you must, Mark. I will survive, with or without your support. After that call, Mark cut the financial support he had been giving me. It was a blow, but not an unexpected one. I tightened my belt, budgeted rigorously, and focused on my job. As the days passed, my anger towards Mark turned into something else, a burning desire for revenge. He thought he could control me, break me. But he was wrong. I was stronger than he knew. I started to plan, to think of ways to expose him for what he was. A cheater, a liar, a manipulator. I wanted him to feel a fraction of the pain he had caused me, and I was willing to do whatever it took to make that happen. The opportunity for my revenge presented itself unexpectedly. Mark's parents, George and Helen, invited us for a family dinner, a tradition we had maintained for years. This time, however, the dinner was anything but ordinary for me. It was the stage where Mark's facade would crumble. I arrived early to help with preparations, my heart heavy yet determined. Helen noticed my subdued mood, but attributed it to stress. Little did she know the turmoil that churned within me. As we were setting the table, the doorbell rang. It was Mark, his usual confident self, unaware of the storm that was about to hit him. Following him was Lucas, my son, the bearer of the truth. Dinner commenced with light conversation, but the air was heavy with unspoken words. I glanced at Lucas, giving him a subtle nod. It was time. Lucas cleared his throat, commanding the attention of the table. There's something I need to say, something about Dad. Mark laughed it off. What is it, son? Another one of your pranks? But Lucas's expression was grave. No, Dad, this is serious. I saw you with another woman. Not just once, multiple times. The room went silent. Mark's face turned ashen, his confident demeanor faltering. What are you talking about, Lucas? That's nonsense, Mark stammered, but his voice lacked conviction. Lucas's gaze was unwavering. I saw you, Dad. You were with her at a hotel. She's young, about my age. You can't deny it. Helen gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. George's face hardened, his eyes narrowing at Mark. Is this true, Mark? Are you cheating on Emma? Helen's voice was a whisper, laced with disbelief and pain. Mark's facade finally broke. He looked from face to face, realizing the gravity of the situation. It's not what you think. She's just a colleague. But his weak defense fell on deaf ears. The damage was done. George stood up, his voice thundering. You bring shame to this family. How could you do this to Emma, to your own son? Mark tried to argue, to justify his actions, but his words were empty, hollow. The truth was laid bare for all to see. I watched, a mix of satisfaction and sorrow in my heart. Mark had been exposed. His betrayal, his lies, all out in the open. But the pain it caused his parents, the disappointment in Lucas's eyes, was a bitter pill to swallow. The dinner ended abruptly, the family shattered by the revelation. Mark left, his head hung low, his image as the perfect son, the perfect husband, destroyed. As I drove home that night, a part of me felt vindicated, but another part grieved for the loss of the family I once knew. Yet amidst the chaos, I knew one thing for certain. Mark would pay for his betrayal. This was just the beginning of his downfall. The fallout from the dinner was immediate and far-reaching. Mark's betrayal had not only fractured our family, but also stained his reputation. His parents, once his staunchest supporters, were now his fiercest critics. In the following weeks, I watched as Mark's life began to unravel. His affair, once hidden in the shadows, was now public knowledge, and the consequences were devastating. His work suffered, friends distanced themselves, and even our son, Lucas, struggled to come to terms with his father's actions. But amidst the chaos, a plan formed in my mind, a plan for retribution. Mark had taken so much from me, it was time he understood the pain he had inflicted. I began by reaching out to a lawyer, a friend from before I married Mark. I explained my situation, the years of emotional neglect, and Mark's recent infidelity. She was sympathetic and immediately offered to help. We'll make sure you get what you deserve, Emma. It's time for Mark to face the consequences of his actions, she said with determination. Armed with legal support, I confronted Mark about a divorce. He was taken aback, his arrogance faltering under the weight of his crumbling world. Emma, please, Let's talk about this. I know I made a mistake, but I can change, he pleaded, a shadow of his former self. But I was resolute. It's too late for that, Mark. You've made your choices, and now you must live with them. The divorce proceedings were messy, as Mark tried to cling to his rapidly diminishing assets. But my lawyer was relentless, and in the end, I was awarded a significant portion of our shared assets, including the house. As Mark's world crumbled, I began to rebuild mine. The divorce had granted me a substantial settlement, which I used to secure my financial independence. I continued working, finding solace and strength in my newfound autonomy. The final blow to Mark came unexpectedly. His affair with the younger woman, now his only solace, ended abruptly. She left him, unable to cope with the public scrutiny and the reality of being with a man whose life was in ruins. Mark was left alone, a shadow of the man he once was. His career, his reputation, his personal life, all had fallen apart because of his choices. As for me, I found peace in my independence. I reconnected with old friends, explored new hobbies, and even began dating again, something I hadn't thought possible. The path to healing was long and fraught with challenges, but I emerged stronger, wiser, and more resilient. Mark's betrayal had broken me, but in the end, it had also freed me. I had faced my deepest fears and come out victorious. And though I took no pleasure in Mark's downfall, there was a sense of justice in seeing him face the consequences of his actions. He had chosen his path, and now he had to walk it alone. As I looked to the future, I knew that new horizons awaited me, horizons filled with hope, strength, and the promise of a life lived on my terms.